Thank you, Senator Reid, for that wonderful, glowing recommendation. This is my third time I've come here to speak at the Clean Energy Summit. It's been a thrill all the times. I have to say that Senator Reid's leadership in promoting clean energy and his leadership in the United States has been remarkable. I also want to thank John Podesta and the Center for American Progress for their co-sponsorship of this summit. These are really important things, and this is something that President Obama, Vice President Biden, and the entire administration has taken to heart, and we have been making unprecedented commitments to clean energy. So in my remarks today, I'm going to talk about two things. Very briefly, I'm going to tell you some of the things we have done over the last two and a half years. But more importantly, I want to talk about what things need to be done going in the future and how important it is to keep the momentum going, even in these times of national stress. So let me start with what's been happening. Through the Recovery Act, the administration and Congress have made a $90 billion investment in clean energy and energy efficiency. These investments in our part of the Department of Energy have come through government loans and loan guarantees, tax incentives with Treasury, and grants. These combination of tools actually saved an economy that was really in free fall when President Obama took office. So as examples of the investments, DOE loan guarantees were made, 5 were made in Nevada, 2 solar generating facilities, 2 geothermal plants, and a 235-mile long high-voltage transmission line to link wind and solar energy within Nevada and to neighboring states like California. But the backing of the private sector investments followed from these loans, and it's estimated that roughly 10 times the amount of money from the private sector was stimulated by this loan program. And these loans have unleashed these billions of dollars that have created tens of thousands of jobs, including an estimated 2,000 in Nevada. We also have manufacturing tax credits. And let me give you just one example. Last June, I visited a company in southern Nevada called Aminex. It's a very highly innovative solar manufacturing company. They got a tax credit of about $5.8 million. And with that, $12 million in private investment is adding hundreds of jobs. And according to the Nevada Development Authority, this investment is going to bring approximately $560 million of economic benefit to the state in the first 5 years, including $118 million in payroll and $12 million in local taxes to the economy. There are many other successes in the Recovery Act of the helps of loans, tax credits, and grants. They have spurred investments in advanced automobile technologies, renewable energy, and critical technologies. We've also used our authority to stimulate development by investing in critical research. I'll give you one example. There's a vibrant new program called Advanced Research Programs Agency for Energy, otherwise known as ARPA-E. And this program had its roots in a report that was written called Rising Above the Gathering Storm in 2005. I was a member of that committee that wrote the report, and in that report we recommended that an ARPA-E be started within the Department of Energy to fund high-risk, high-reward projects. And in 2006, after we issued the report, I was asked by the committee to go before groups in the Senate and the House to encourage their support of ARPA-E. We argued that you have to take a more daring approach to funding innovative projects. Those daring approaches might lead to game-changing innovations. And in short, to use a baseball analogy, we weren't swinging from the heels enough. We were investing in incremental things, singles, but a home run could really change the whole landscape of energy technology. Now, when you swing from the heels, you expect a few strikeouts. But what you don't want to do is swing at bad balls. So what was very important that the staff at ARPA-E be of the highest caliber. And we pointed out these risks to the Senate and the House and said that the ultimate failure or success of the Department of Energy ability would hinge on its ability to recruit truly outstanding program managers. So I was a little nerdy physicist at the time, and I could never imagined that I would be entrusted with starting this agency within the Department of Energy. But now you fast forward to now, and by all accounts, ARPE is a spectacular success, and the team is truly stellar. It's really too early to tell whether we actually have home runs, but we see a number of people rounding second base. And you're going to hear more about ARPE and its successes later in the summit. So this is just a snapshot of some of the things we're doing, but the Recovery Act is coming to an end, and the question is, where do we go from here? And we find ourselves in challenging times. We have to take actions to reduce the federal deficit. And in these hard times, there are a number of people who argue that we can't afford to make continued investments in clean energy. So let me argue to the contrary, that indeed it is part of our American heritage that in times of stress, we have not only dealt with those times of stress, but we've also taken the longer view. And let me give you first one example. The Civil War was without a doubt one of the darkest moments in our history. During the time, our country was in incredible stress, and yet, let me point out a few of the things that were done during the Civil War. The Morrill Land-Grant College Act was passed in 1862. In this act, states were given federal lands, and they can use those lands for income generation, or they can sell the lands. And the intent was to use the money to support educational institutions which, I quote, teach such branches of learning as are related to agriculture and the mechanic arts in order to promote the liberal and practical education of the industrial classes. So most of the support for these land-grant institutions went to improve agricultural productivity. By the way, agricultural productivity, let's say of corn, has increased 8-fold per acre since the 1930s. Many of these colleges now know, Iowa State was the first institution. Others include Ohio State. What you may not know is the University of California, Berkeley was a land-grant institution, as was MIT and Cornell. A remarkable number of some of our greatest universities, our greatest state and private universities, were started in the Civil War in a time of incredible stress. President Lincoln also signed the Pacific Railway Act of 1862. At the time, we had railroads, but no investor was willing to make those investments to go into uncivilized, if you will, uncharted territory that would stretch the railroad that connect the West to the East. And so generous public financing was given to two private companies, the Union Pacific Railroad Company and the Central Pacific Railroad Company. Land was given, and it was with that act in 1862 that drove the rapid development of the transcontinental railroad system, and by 1869, only 7 years later, the golden spike at Promontory Summit was hammered down. Remarkable. The transcontinental railroad system again started during the Civil War. Finally, I want to mention that Lincoln signed into law the creation of the National Academy of Sciences. The bill states, and I quote, "The Academy shall, whenever called upon by any department of the government, investigate and report upon any subject of science." It was remarkable. The U.S. government respected science and wanted its opinion. The National Academy of Sciences was an advisory group to the U.S. government. It was not founded as an honorific society, and again, during the time of great stress. Now, my only quibble with this law was it also said, "The Academy shall receive no compensation whatever." Scientists were always a cheap date. Anyway, apart from that, I give you 3 examples during the Civil War where the United States, in a time of great stress, took a long view that added immensely to our prosperity. Let me give you another example, a different time. I was growing up, I was a kid during the building up of the Cold War. and in 1957, the Soviet Union launched a satellite they called Sputnik, or Sputnik 1, and this orbited the Earth and was a shock to the United States, because this event showed us that the Soviet Union's German rocket scientists were better than our German rocket scientists. Now, President Eisenhower was leading our country, a five-star general. He could have easily said, we're going to invest more money in military, we're going to invest more money in rocket scientists, and that's how we're going to come back. But he didn't say that. He took the long view. What he said was, the root problem was that we are beginning to lag the Soviet Union in the training of scientists and engineers. And so he said, this is where we're going to make our investment, not only in college and in graduate school, but kindergarten through 12th grade, science and engineering. And this program, his response to Sputnik, unleashed educational programs that I benefited personally from when I was growing up, and many of my fellow scientists who are now my age benefited from those scientific programs. That really added a lot to our scientific dominance in the second half of the 20th century. So now we're in a different Sputnik moment, and it's a race to develop clean energy technologies. The awakening is not like Sputnik, the launch a single event. It has been happening over a decade or so, but the stakes, I think, are higher and the pace is accelerating. Worldwide, is now a multi-trillion-dollar business. China, the European Union, other countries are moving very aggressively. China, Germany, Great Britain, Canada, and many other countries have developed government loan programs to support pioneering investments in clean energy. China has now surpassed the U.S. in the export of all high-technology manufactured goods. And they are leading the world now in the deployment of clean energy in their country relative to anywhere else. They've passed the United States as well. They just instituted additional subsidies to nurture the development of clean energy within their country. To what goal? Well, at first they want to diversify their energy supply. But secondly, by developing a home market, they hope to develop a business that can dominate the export market. They have developed the highest voltage, most efficient transmission and distribution lines in the world, and now they're going around the world and marketing them. Won't you want to buy your equipment from us? So, let me turn to another subject and another myth. Many people say that some of the United States' greatest technologies have come from the private sector or individual investors, that the government really didn't play a big role. So let me talk about a few of them. The Wright brothers, the invention of the airplane. Two young people working in a bicycle shop blow by the competition and invent the first powered airplane. Remarkable. What you don't know or may not know is that that was in 1904, 1905, but by 1915, Europe had blown by what they have done. During World War I, there were no American-built planes. It was dominated by the Germans, the French, the British. And in 1915, Congress noted this and created the National Advisory Committee in Aeronautics. And then they did something even more remarkable. In the mid-early 20s, they decided to let private companies carry the precious U.S. mail. And by carrying the U.S. mail, they created a market, an early market demand that pushed airplane development. That plus the military sponsored this, and we grew back, and we captured the lead in aerospace engineering. Say, we invented the first one, we lost it, we got it back. What about the semiconductor and computer industry? Bell Laboratories invented the first transistor. The first integrated circuit was co-invented independently by someone at Texas Instruments and Fairchild Semiconductors, Noyce and Kilby. However, that industry would not have gotten started had it not been, again, the U.S. military, who were the first customers of these transistors and these integrated circuits. And it was that early market created by the U.S. military that provided the market draw that enabled the U.S. semiconductor industry to be the dominant force in the world. The same is true of computers. one of the first electronic computers, again, a military investment. The first computer science departments at places like MIT and Stanford and Carnegie Mellon, also invested by ARPA. The precursor to the internet, the so-called ARPANET, all government-sponsored. And of course, agriculture, and the great productivity of American agriculture, which really started its roots in the land-grant universities in the Civil War. So the government played an incredibly intimate role in all the technologies that led to prosperity in the United States. And we must not lose sight of that fact. So we're in this global race to produce clean energy technologies. The cost of solar technology, solar photovoltaics have dropped by 50% in the last 5 years. And when I talk to all the companies and their business plans, they say within the next 10 years, within this decade, they expect the price of solar-powered electricity to drop by another factor of 2. The competition is fierce. China is now the dominant exporter of solar technologies, even though the United States invented the first silicon photocell. And in response to Sputnik, President Kennedy called for a moonshot, a moon program. And in response to our energy Sputnik moment, the Department of Energy has called for a sunshot program. And in this program, we're going to help industries in the United States accelerate the pace of decline in price through research and development so that the cost of solar energy would be competitive with any form of fossil energy without subsidy, perhaps within the decade. We also see other things, an inevitability that the price of oil is going to be going up in the coming decades. It's a simple supply and demand issue that developing countries like China and India are going to be demanding much more oil. And so we would want fuel-efficient cars, not only for our domestic use, but also for export. And we passed an historic fuel economy standard, 54 miles per gallon for cars and light-duty trucks. And because of these fuel standards, consumers are expected to save $1 trillion in gasoline and diesel in the coming years. This is also why we've entered a race to create advanced batteries that can power plug-in hybrids and electric vehicles. We are needed. This is one step in breaking our dependency on foreign oil, and these electric vehicles will be needed. Let me also mention appliance standards, refrigerators, air conditioners, washing machines. It's been estimated that the appliance standards that the Department of Energy has promulgated and will continue to promulgate will be saving Americans roughly $500 billion by 2030. Certainly hundreds of billions of dollars have already been saved by these standards. So I want to conclude by outlining just a few simple steps that the U.S. can take to lead in clean energy. This is what we need in order to promote the development of the new technologies invented in America, made in America, and sold worldwide. In time of fiscal austerity, we need to look for those most highly leveraged use of tax dollars to encourage private sector investments. So number one, we've got to invest in research, development, and education. I've given several examples, and we need this research to bring down the cost of clean energy technologies to remain internationally competitive. Our scientific research and engineering innovation machine is the envy of the world, but it shouldn't be taken for granted. Programs that support science, engineering research, and a renewed emphasis in science, technology, engineering, and math education are essential to nurture the human capital. These investments are the seed corn of our future. Number two, enact a clean energy standard to create a market pull for clean energy deployment. This policy requires no investment of tax dollars. Let me say that again. A clean energy standard requires no investment of tax dollars. It doesn't pick winners. And if done wisely and in concert with an intelligent research and development program, it will have minimal impact on energy prices. And it will stimulate investments, create jobs, and keep us internationally competitive. Three, we need to seriously consider creating a clean energy development agency. A so-called CETA, like the one Senators Bingaman and Murkowski are working on, could support the first-of-a-kind manufacturing plants and help deploy clean energy. Even the temporary boost from the Recovery Act, our clean energy investments in 2010 were $34 billion. behind China at $54 billion and Germany at $41 billion. The Clean Energy Investment Loan Program will be stopping by the end of this year, and if we do nothing, we will fall somewhere between Italy and Spain. So in order to be more nimble, Murkowski Senators Brigham and Murkowski proposed that they set up an organization independent of the Department of Energy, the OMB, and Treasury. They suggest the load agency, I believe, would require perhaps $5 or $10 billion, and it could have a huge multiplier effect. There are examples of independent agencies, like the so-called Export Impact Bank, or XM Bank. And like XM, it can be designed to be self-sustaining after the initial investment. So the proceeds from the interest on the loans could be channeled back to further loans. And so it won't be a 10-to-1 multiplier effect. It could be far, far higher than 10-to-1. XM Bank was formed decades ago and is still going without further tax dollars. The Clean Energy Standard and the Clean Energy Development Administration can be our plow horse that will create the market pull and provide the investment power to promote the development and deployment of clean energy. So with these few simple, cost-effective, and highly leveraged steps, I think the U.S. can lead in the clean energy race. We do have the greatest technology innovation machine in the world, but we are at a crossroads. We can lead the world in clean energy development, or we can hunker down and do nothing. And remember, in times of national stress, during the darkest days of the Civil War and the Cold War, our country took the long view and was better for it. Thank you.